My name is Madeleine Carter, and I am 34 years old. I live in Rivershade, a quiet lakeside town where mornings smell like pine trees and evenings glow with soft, golden light. I work as an academic writing teacher, a job that fits my love for calm moments, thoughtful words, and simple routines. My husband, Adrian, is an architect, constantly busy, yet endlessly thoughtful. And our 7-year-old daughter, Lila, is the bright heartbeat of our little family. Our life is built on trust and warm habits, slow dinners at home, weekend picnics by the lake, and bedtime stories where Lila always asks for one more page. Everything felt steady, safe, and perfectly ordinary, like a soft blanket wrapped around me on a winter night. I truly believed my life was whole, until the night everything shifted. Life in our little house in Rivershade moved in a gentle rhythm, the kind of rhythm you don't notice until it's gone. Every morning, Adrian would wake up first and quietly prepare a cup of coffee just the way I liked it, mild, warm, and sweet. He always placed it on my desk with a soft smile before leaving for his architectural studio. While he did that, I helped Lila get ready for school. We sat together at the small wooden table by the sunlit window, eating breakfast as the lake breeze drifted inside. Lila would tell us about her dreams, her drawings, or the story she wanted to write next. Adrian often teased her gently, and her laughter filled the kitchen like a melody I never wanted to lose. In the evenings, after dinner, we usually curled up on the couch to watch animated movies or build little castles with Lila's blocks. Adrian loved to pretend he was a giant trying to steal the castle, and Lila would scream in playful terror while I watched them with a full heart. Adrian had a habit of leaving tiny love notes around the house, on my planner, in my coat pocket, next to the sink. Notes like "You're the calm in my chaos," or "Thank you for being my home." I kept every single one in a small box under my bed. We were even planning for a second child. Adrian had already chosen a name he adored, Everly. He said it felt soft, hopeful, and filled with light, just like the future he imagined with us. I never questioned him. I never checked his phone. I never doubted his loyalty. To me, he was the safest person I knew. Looking back now, I realize that the peace we lived in didn't just make our home warm. It made the betrayal that followed feel like a storm I could never have prepared for. The shift in my life began on an ordinary Friday night. Adrian had a company anniversary celebration, something he attended every year. Normally he would come home smelling like cologne and stale appetizers, a little tired but cheerful, ready to kiss Lila goodnight before collapsing onto the couch beside me. But that night, when the clock ticked past midnight, he still hadn't returned. I tried texting him, calling once, then twice, but he only replied with a short message, "On the way." When he stepped through the door, he looked different. His tie was loose, his eyes unfocused, and there was a strange heaviness in his voice. I asked if he was okay, but he brushed it off, saying he was just exhausted. Something inside me tightened, but I didn't push further. The next morning, I was slicing strawberries for Lila's pancakes when Adrian walked into the kitchen. His face was pale, his hands trembling slightly as he reached for the counter as if needing support. "Madeleine," he said quietly, "there's something I have to tell you." I turned to him, still holding the knife, sensing the air shift. "What is it?" He swallowed hard before speaking. I kissed someone last night." The world seemed to freeze. The refrigerator hummed loudly in the silence. My breathing turned shallow. "Who?" I asked, barely recognizing my own voice. His eyes dropped. "Camille." The name crashed into me like cold water. Camille, the woman from his university days, the one he once thought he'd marry before life took them in different directions. I felt my stomach twist. He rushed to explain. "We only talked for a moment. We were both drinking. It was just one kiss. A stupid moment. It meant nothing. But the problem was that it meant everything, to me. Trust had always been the foundation of our marriage. A single crack felt like the whole structure might collapse. As I stood there frozen, Lila wandered into the kitchen, still rubbing her eyes, asking why we were so quiet. Adrian stepped back, ashamed, while I forced a smile for her, even though my heart was burning. The rest of the morning unfolded like a blur. Adrian pleaded for forgiveness. He said he didn't want to lose our family, that he didn't know why he let himself slip. I walked to our bedroom, shut the door, and stared at my reflection in the mirror. Was our marriage truly as strong as I believed? Had I missed warning signs? Was love supposed to hurt like this? For the first time in years, I didn't have an answer. And that silence was terrifying. That evening, after putting Lila to bed, I asked Adrian to sit with me in the living room. The house felt unusually quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. I sat across from him, hands clasped tightly together, trying to steady the storm building inside my chest. "Tell me everything," I said. My voice didn't tremble, but my heart did. Adrian looked defeated. "I told you the truth this morning. I kissed her, and I regret it." "No," I replied softly. "You told me the surface. I want the truth beneath it. Why her? Why now? And what exactly happened?" He hesitated, and even that hesitation hurt. He finally confessed that Camille had been the one who leaned in first. They had talked more than he initially admitted. She brought up old memories, joked about their college days, and before he knew it, he got caught in the moment. That was how he phrased it. Caught in the moment. As if betrayal were nothing more than a gust of wind. But what pierced me deepest was when he said he didn't stop immediately. "It took me a few seconds to pull away," he whispered, eyes filled with shame. A few seconds. Long enough to break a marriage. He added that he had thought about telling me that same night but panicked. "I didn't want to hurt you," he said. I almost laughed, bitterly. "You didn't want to hurt me, Adrian? But you already did. Last night. The moment you let her touch you." He bowed his head. "I love you, Maddie. I made a mistake, but I love you." I believed he loved me. But love didn't erase the image of Camille's lips on his, or the knowledge that he chose silence over honesty. After an hour of painful confession, I realized something. I couldn't breathe with him in the same house. Every time I looked at him, I saw the crack in our marriage widen. So I told him he needed to leave for a while. Not forever, but enough for me to think, to feel, to not collapse every time I heard his voice. Adrian broke down. I had seen him stressed, tired, even frustrated, but never like this. He cried openly, quietly, as if each tear were an apology he couldn't put into words. He begged to stay, to work on things, to fix what he broke. But I couldn't. My heart was still bleeding. I stood by the front door as he packed a small bag. The moment he stepped outside, the cold night air rushed in, brushing past me like a warning. I closed the door gently, but the sound echoed through my bones. A few minutes later, Lila wandered into the hallway, rubbing her sleepy eyes. "Where did Daddy go?" she asked. I knelt down and hugged her so tightly that she wriggled in surprise. "Daddy needs some time," I whispered. When she went back to bed, I stood alone by the window, watching the lights of the quiet town shimmer over the lake. Outside, everything looked calm, peaceful, unchanged. But inside me, everything had fallen apart. My world, once warm and stable, now felt like shattered glass beneath my feet. I moved into Serena's apartment for a few weeks, carrying nothing but a suitcase and a heart that felt completely hollow. The first nights were unbearable. I lay awake for hours, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage and asking myself where I had gone wrong. I barely ate. I cancelled classes because my mind couldn't focus long enough to teach a full lesson. Serena watched me fall apart quietly. One evening, she placed a cup of tea beside me and said, "Madeleine, you can't control another person's choices. You can only choose how you move forward from them." Her words sank into me like soft but undeniable truth. I started reflecting on my life, on the years I had spent trying to be the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect anchor for our family. I realized I had always placed Adrian's needs above my own. I forgave his long work nights, his emotional distance, his forgetfulness, telling myself he was stressed, tired, overwhelmed. But now, sitting in Serena's living room with my heart in pieces, I asked myself a question I had never dared to ask. When was the last time I chose myself? The answer frightened me, because I couldn't remember. Slowly, painfully, I began to see the truth. This heartbreak was not the end of my life. It was a wake-up call. A reminder that loyalty should never mean losing yourself, and love should never demand silence in the face of hurt. The sadness didn't disappear overnight, but it softened. It shifted. And in its place, a fragile sense of self-worth began to glow again, small, trembling, but undeniably present. For the first time in a long while, I felt the faint whisper of hope. I came back home to Lila and the familiar rhythm of our small house. The first weeks were quiet and careful, me learning how to be both mother and myself again. I settled into a routine that felt like a soft promise: wake early, make pancakes for Lila, walk her to school, then lace up my shoes and run around the lake. Running became a way to clear my head. Each morning, the cold air and steady cadence of my feet helped me breathe. I wanted to turn my pain into something useful, so I joined a local art class. The studio smelled of paint and turpentine, and my hands, which had once only held lesson plans and coffee cups, learned to mix colors and make soft, honest strokes. Painting taught me how to feel without words. I could pour confusion onto a canvas and watch it change into lines that didn't need explanation. One night, on a quiet impulse, I started a small blog. At first I wrote just for myself, short posts in English about motherhood, about trust, about learning to be brave. I shared simple phrases and the little vocabulary I used with my students, mixing life lessons with language practice. To my surprise, people from different countries found my words and left gentle, understanding comments. Their messages, "Stay strong, you are not alone," felt like warm hands on my back. A former colleague, Ethan Graves, began to send occasional messages. He wasn't intrusive. He sent small notes, a link to a book, a photo of a city flower, a reminder to take a break. He never pushed, never asked for more than friendship. His kind, unobtrusive presence felt safe, an honest human connection that didn't demand anything from me. Months passed. I watched Lila grow in small, wonderful ways. Her drawings became bolder, her laughter louder. I continued to run, paint, and write. The little rituals gave me stability. They did not erase the past, but they made each day more bearable and slowly more hopeful. Jonathan reached out many times during the year, letters, texts, apologies. He never tried to force his way back in. He visited Lila regularly and always respected the boundaries I set. Over time, I noticed a change in him. He stopped acting entitled. He showed humility, patience, and consistent care for our daughter without demanding anything from me in return. One quiet afternoon, while Lila painted at the table, Jonathan asked if we could talk. He spoke softly, admitting how deeply he had failed and how he had learned from the loneliness his choices brought. His voice was not the proud man I once knew, it was tired, honest, and genuine. I looked at him, then at Lila, and felt something inside me shift. The old hurt had not disappeared, but I could see that growth and remorse were real. When I decided to forgive, it was not because I had weakened. It was because I believed in change and because I wanted to model courage and compassion for my daughter. I chose to open a new chapter, with clear boundaries, with healing work still to do, and with a hope that family can be rebuilt when one truly commits to change. The scene opens with me standing at the edge of Lake Rivershade, the soft glow of the sunset spreading across the water like a delicate painting. The air is cool, still, and calm, so different from the storms I walked through in the past year. I take a slow breath, letting the quiet of the lake settle inside me, and I finally allow myself to look back on everything I survived. My journey feels like a long, winding road of shifting emotions, peaceful days that felt unbreakable, unwavering trust, the sharp sting of betrayal, the collapse of everything I believed in, the lonely nights of questioning myself, the painful but necessary self-awareness, the slow climb toward healing, and finally, the unexpected but genuine path to reconciliation. It wasn't a straight line, and it wasn't easy. But it was real. I share this message not just as a storyteller, but as someone who has lived through it. Trust is fragile, but people can change. And when someone truly regrets, grows, and earns your forgiveness, not demands it, love can find its way back. A second chance is never a sign of weakness. It is a sign of wisdom, strength, and knowing what your heart is ready for. I look across the lake, imagining 1,000 listeners standing beside me, each with their own wounds, their own choices to make. So I ask you, if you were in my place, would you give a second chance, or would you walk away? As the scene fades, I offer my final invitation. Share your thoughts in the comments, and follow the channel for more emotional English listening stories to help you learn and grow, one story at a time.